Hello and welcome back to the Conquest of Happiness. In today's video, we're going to be covering what I call nervous system fatigue or nervous fatigue that Bertrand Russell simply calls fatigue. These are observations that he collects up in his chapter 5. So nervous fatigue comes from anxiety, worry, emotional exhaustion, and burnout. It's a kind of fatigue contrasted to physical fatigue that he actually finds is generally part of a healthy lifestyle, as we kind of all know. It's mental fatigue. It's a kind of thinking and feeling pattern that leaves us drained and exhausted, not as a result of actual exertion in the world, but as a result of rather unproductive kinds of mental exertion, such as rumination, such as worry, such as perseveration, such as obsessing, such as trying to control things. Lots of different ways that we produce fatigue mentally. We are, more than ever, and maybe this is starting to shift as a result of some of the teachings that withdrawing from the economy and staying safe as we all weather this global pandemic has will maybe teach us. But generally speaking, we are overworked, overscheduled, overstimulated, and overstressed, and live nerve-wracking lives as a result of this. And this imbalance, this chronic imbalance, is causing the kind of daily fatigue that leads into a lifetime of fatigue that robs us of the kinds of relaxation, leisure, enjoyment that really is essential to living a happy life. We can't deny that. We can't push that away. We can't defer that to retirement. We really need to be doing that more or less consistently in order to be happy. Such is the logic that he puts forth in this chapter. So we need to be engaged in healthier cycles of restoration, relaxation, creativity, leisure, and work, getting things done, getting stuff checked off our to-do list, upholding our obligations and responsibilities. We need both dimensions in order to be happy. We can't sacrifice too much of our enjoyment and leisure and rest and relaxation and expect that we are going to be happy, fulfilled, satisfied, and not so agitated, irritated, and beset by concerns that cause us to be very uptight. There is a lot of research indicating that we adapt to both positive experiences and negative experiences. And what this leads to is conclusions such as opting into materialism is not a pathway that leads us to a sustainable kind of happiness, because when we acquire something, it generally loses its shine and we revert back through this adaptation principle to more or less kind of a set point of happiness that we had before we made before we purchased the thing. But it also works the other way. Like if we have a major setback, disappointment, a loss of opportunity, even a loss of a limb, they've shown in research that we bounce back to this happiness set point. There are certain things that defy this adaptation that Jonathan Haidt puts forth in the happiness hypothesis. He puts forth on page 92 some of these things that resist adaptation, which you should be really wary of, including in your life, or you should take pains to protect yourself from, because they really are insidious agitators to us. They are insidiously grate on our spirit. One is noise, particularly industrial noise, or being in unnatural industrial settings, especially chronically. Commuting. Long commutes through heavy traffic we don't get used to that. That is a perennial source of unhappiness. Even after years of commuting, still we don't adapt to that as a part of life. It drives us crazy. He also mentions lack of control, shame, and relationships in this section, in that we need relationships to generally be happy. We can't opt out of relationships and expect to be happy. Also, I want to add here, too many clock hours, too much rushing. All of these are common sources of unhappiness we don't adapt to. They just wear us down. So if we create a kind of recommendation from this chapter, and Bertrand Russell might have said something like, study what frays your nerves and be really proactive, really vigilant around those things, and be creative so that your nerves aren't frayed. Whether that's engaging with the thing with a healthier way of interacting with it, or constraining the amount of time you're involved in things that fray your nerves, setting some kind of appropriate boundary, right? Whether it's a different kind of boundary while being involved, or a stricter boundary not being involved altogether, which is kind of extreme. To do that, and to do more things that help you restore frayed nerves, or more ideally, help you not get them frayed to begin with. He thinks that a hygiene of the nerves is imperative. You should develop a hygiene of the nerves. You should have a protocol for yourself that helps you with frayed nerves. We should all endorse that happens, and that's an insidious threat to our happiness, and be really, again, powerful agents in our lives that say no to what frays our nerves where we can, and mitigates the impact of what frays our nerves if we can't. Relatedly, he suggests that we need to learn to go about our days less stressfully. Rather than just endure stress or resign ourselves to busy, stressful days, we really need to be more curators of our days and live in more balance, and find solutions in our days that don't end up in stress tizzies at the end. If we're ending the day stressfully and need a release at the end of each day, something is wrong in terms of work-life balance, or ways in which we're going about engaging in our days. Passing years in strenuous struggle, he warns against, not just because that just like kind of sounds miserable in and of it themselves, those years, but he warns that when you're accustomed to living so stressfully, that predisposes you to being a nervous wreck all the time. You won't be able to shake off the habit when the need is past, or when retirement is here. You won't be able to shake off that habit of living stressfully. And through the years, you have deprived yourself of learning about yourself, learning what you naturally enjoy. If you don't have to make a living, right? What's inherently interesting to you, what appeals to you, what calls your attention. You're depriving yourself of all of these vital years in which you can discover what fuels you if you were taken care of, what you would be doing with your time. He doesn't say this, but if we translate what he's saying, he would be a strong advocate of practicing self-care on all levels of our being: physical self-care, psychological self-care, spiritual and emotional self-care. He would say that a simple, quiet life, that has these daily rewards of self-care is a good life. He also suggests that we learn how to control our own minds instead of trying to control our experience. I know this is a big conversion, and I think it's a useful one to practice. Because we drive ourselves crazy and cause so much unnecessary suffering to ourselves and others trying to control experience, which includes other people. We can't do that, but what we can do is control our own mind. So learning that skill set, apprenticing that skill set is really important, and just changing over, trying to think about controlling our environment and instead trying to control ourselves. He says, until we come face to face with the difficulty in ourselves, how the way that we're thinking about things is really getting us hung up. Everything to which we look for salvation is nothing more than an extra curtain with which to hide that difficulty from our eyes. It's something to meditate on. He also feels like we need to learn to control our mind, because inherently our mind, and we've come to find this out as the discipline of cognitive neuroscience has come into being since Bertrand Russell wrote this work so long ago and has developed a number of findings in that discipline, that we trend toward or even default into worry and pessimism. Just the way our brains process information, that kind of is our inheritance from how we survived from an evolutionary sense. Our brain is wired to, for example, scan for threats. It's trained to be on the lookout for what is negative or what might harm us. And we need to robustly counter those defaults or trends with practices and techniques that help us cultivate a better mindset that ward away from those trends of thought. For example, gratitude practice is robustly shown to counter certain trends of mind that lead us to feel deprived, where we tend to compare ourselves to others or to more favorable conditions and feel a sense of scarcity. Gratitude practice helps us really make use of what we have and appreciate it, which is not what our brain naturally wants to pay attention to and how it wants to process our life experience. It wants to advance our interests. It wants to optimize situations. It wants to move toward our greater good to ensure our survival. But that also creates this chronic dissatisfaction that gratitude practice can be a great antidote for. To a great extent, emotional exhaustion is caused by worry, and might I add rumination, which is a distinction that I first learned from Eckhart Tolle. We ruminate about our past and we worry about our future. And Eckhart Tolle is Mr. Now, as the success coach I like to read. Tamma Keeves calls him, I guess, in her household. Worry, and like I said, adding rumination is a pernicious source of causing mental exhaustion, which could be prevented, he says, by a better philosophy of life and a little mental discipline. And very precociously, he sort of puts forth some techniques that we might draw from the traditions of meditation and mindfulness practice and yoga to help us with that mental discipline that he is suggesting we all learn. He has a great description of what worry does. It creates a sort of filter that mediates our present moment experience in this kind of fog of cognition. He says that impressions reach the worrier muffled and muted, the worrier deriving no pleasure from his meals or from sunshine, tending to become tensely concentrated upon a few objects and indifferent to the rest. Sounds miserable, right? We need to fight worry in all of its forms. Stay away from that. He does address needing to instill peace of mind into the subconscious, that we can't just sort of rationally convince ourselves that there's nothing to worry about, that deeply in a subconscious way we have to let go of worry and fear. That's a big subject. That's a long road for many, or a difficult road, I might say. Lastly, he says that it's amazing how much both happiness and deficiency can be increased by the cultivation of an orderly mind which thinks about a matter adequately at the right time rather than inadequately at all times.